That concludes the Spanish portion of my presentation. My name is Dave Harrelson. Thank you very much for letting me spend a few minutes with you today. On behalf of Argano, thank you. We think we have found an incredible jewel in the acquisition of Net Logistics. They bring a tremendous amount of capability to Argano, as Tonio was just talking about, and I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about that ingredient. We'll call it a recipe, the Argano recipe. But again, thank you for the business. Thank you for being partners with us. Thank you for helping the business grow, and we hope going forward we'll grow together. So as was mentioned, I think one of the key ingredients that Net Logistics brings for us is the logistics piece of it. This is a big addition to the Argano set of services. So from order management, warehouse management, transportation, resource, supply chain. These are incredible skills for us to add to what we do. Part of what we bring as Argano is enterprise technology, and how do we bring those two together? So deep expertise with Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, and a variety of other capabilities, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then enterprise performance. We bring these capabilities together as well. So the next piece is, how do we wrap it together? Part of what Argano brings and has deep expertise is data orchestration. So data management, data security, data governance, and then wrapping it together with agentic AI. These are the capabilities that we now have together between Argano and Net Logistics that we can bring into conversations with our customers, and how we can help you accelerate where you want to go and how you want to get there. So with that, this is what it looks like. And these are the partners that we have to help enable that transformation. So today, the recipe now that we can bring as Argano into an engagement is pretty deep, it's pretty wide, and it's pretty comprehensive. So we're grateful for Net Logistics and what they bring to the equation. One of the business units inside of Argano is something called Connect, cleverly named because we bring connection end-to-end across the enterprise. So if you see these pieces in the middle, this represents your business. Revenue operations, supply chain, enterprise, resource planning, pieces of the business that you normally have. What Connect brings and what we bring together is UX and UI design. So think of that as an inside of our company, a creative and design agency. We can help design websites, mobile capabilities, the abilities for to bring the back end of the business and the value of the data in the back end of the business to a self-service environment, whether it's to partners, customers, or employees. We have that capability. We also have integration, deep integration, as was mentioned, cloud innovation and AI-enabled technologies. This is the layer that we bring on top of how we engage with our customers. And I thought a way to sort of illustrate that would be to talk about a customer that we have, which is a global e-commerce footwear company. This is an organization that's based in the US. They've had tremendous growth over the last 5 years, and they want to continue to grow. They want to grow their operations outside North America. They're looking to grow into Europe and also in Latin America. But like many organizations that we work with, they had some struggles and they had some challenges, like standing right there. One of the challenges they had was that they needed to keep the business moving while they make this transformation. They brought us in for advisory services. They brought us in to help them think, how do they make this change while not disrupting the business? They also wanted to expand their footprint into other geographies, including, as I mentioned, Europe and Latin America. But some of the problems they had was that they had outgrown their SAP platform. They were using SAP Business One. It served them well, but they outgrew the use of that. And so they moved into SAP S/4HANA. They also made a selection of Boomi for their integration platform. And they also had several systems in the business that were being retired. They had tremendous technical debt. So we had to put a plan together that helped them think through what that transformation would look like. We knew they couldn't make that transformation all at once. So we had to put a roadmap together that they could do this in an iterative way that would allow the business to continue to strive, but also to transform. They also were bringing on third-party logistics partners. In particular, in the UK and LATAM, they were working with refunds and enhancements, and they were looking at EDI and wholesale expansions of the business. So they had a lot of moving parts, and we had to help them think through how do they make that transformation. Two approaches that we took. First, we look at the delivery and the infrastructure. As I mentioned, we took an iterative approach. I think that's the best approach for many of our clients. We can't just do everything all at once. So we had to think through a minimum viable product approach. What can we do first that could satisfy the business? What could we launch in about 6 months that would give them the capabilities they needed, but then would also have a plan that would have a roadmap with about every 3 to 5 months releasing new capabilities to the business. So it was an 18-month transformation plan. The second piece we thought through was how do we utilize microservices as a way to decouple applications in the architecture that would allow them to move swiftly, that would keep the costs low, that would have an efficient way to integrate, and microservices was the best use and the best way for us to move forward. The second was the architecture. What was that integration going to look like between a new SAP platform, retiring old platforms, bringing in third-party logistics providers, looking at Boomi as the application? They selected new platforms, Shopify for e-commerce. How do we integrate that? How do we make that work in the business? AWS was the hyperscaler, the environment that all of this was going to reside in, so we had to have integrations and take advantage of that along with AI. Boomi was the integration platform of choice. And then, as I mentioned, SAP S/4HANA. That's a lot of new technology into the business, and trying to put a plan together that the business could ingest that while continuing to do business without bringing it to a standstill. We had to have a plan, and so a scalable architecture with Boomi was one of the paths we took. And so, by the way, I should mention they selected Argano to help because we had capabilities in all of these areas. Shopify for the commerce and the 3PL, they wanted to use out-of-the-box integration capabilities, out-of-the-box integration services that would reduce costs and create an efficiency that would allow us to get live faster. And then what Boomi offered was a low-code engineering environment. We wanted to make sure we use as much out of the box as possible while reducing the risk of any kind of failure along the way. We had to think through what were the KPIs, what were the key metrics for success, and how are we going to enable that? I think there was many successful pieces of this for us. I should mention we're live. We've been live. We've gotten through the 18-month roadmap, and this organization is moving along rather rapidly and very successful. But I think part of what we did, we reduced the technical debt by getting a modernized architecture, by getting rid of custom applications, by finding tools that they could hire talent from the marketplace that helped them reduce technical debt. That helped us get into solutions that were cloud-based, that were microservice-based, that allowed us to grow, to take the business from where it was to where it needed to be over the next 5 years. We had to have an infrastructure that allowed them to be scalable and reduce that debt. Second, they are onboarding more partners, more third-party logistics partners, more partners for distribution and resale. So we had to have an environment that allowed them to take on either new acquisitions or bring on new partners rapidly. So we had to have a simplified partner process, which meant we had to streamline the integration by using Shopify and all the services that came out of the box. The less customization, the better. And then third, we had to have a future-ready platform. We had to help them think not where they are today, but where they want to be in 3 to 5 years. And we had to think through an open architecture, an architecture that was very cloud-based, that allowed them to take advantage of out-of-the-box solutions and then leverage AI as a part of that growth process. And that's what we were able to do as we succeeded through these integration pieces. Integration was one of the key pieces of it. There are many lessons to learn through an 18-month engagement. That partnership is important. Having open communication is important with our partner. Having a plan, executing that plan, iterating on that plan. But I think there are 3 key lessons that we took from this supply chain engagement. Number 1, I think continuity is an imperative. We had to make sure that the business didn't stop while we were making this transformation. Transformation is hard. There's change management on using new systems. There's new ways of processing information and data. There's new partners that are coming into the ecosystem. Everybody has a different way that they do business. We had to think through, how do we maintain continuity while we make sure we set up for transformation? We cannot stop the supply chain. So I think when we think through continuity, we had to eliminate the single points of failure. We had to upfront do the advisory services to make sure we had a plan, that we were thinking through, how do we make sure that the single points of failure were removed? How do we mitigate that risk? But I think a number one lesson is continuity is an imperative. Number two, agility is the new efficiency. A clever phrase, but I think an event-driven architecture with modern capabilities allows us to onboard all these partners and these 3PL partners much quicker. So we had to have a flexible cloud-based environment that allowed us to be agile in the way that we went about deploying these solutions. We had to bring on new partners quickly. We had to introduce new channels quickly. They're selling into other parts of Europe. And so they needed the ability to have an infrastructure and a capability that was very agile to help them mitigate the risk. Lastly, resilience. We needed to make sure we had a backbone to the business. The SAP S/4HANA was crucial to the business, as well as all the other components and the architecture to put it together. So we had to have resilience built in. We didn't want failure points, but we know there's going to be. So how are we going to manage those failure points? How do we make sure that we built in resilience in this complex environment? So I think the three things we look through is continuity, agility, and resilience. Today, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of success with this client, and I think we are going to see a lot more success with this client and several others with the addition of Net Logistics into the business. We're thrilled that they're part of the family, and I think there's a lot that we can do together with you here in LATAM and other parts of the world. That's my story at the moment. I'm grateful that we can share this day with you. Thank you for being a part of the Argano family. And I think next up, I want to bring Paco, if he's available. I think he's somewhere here, because we want to talk about our strategy. I want to talk about where we're going next, and I want Paco to articulate that. I had 30 minutes, and I've given it to you in 15, so I took a lot less time than I think they thought I was going to. But again, that's part of what Argano brings to the story. So Paco, why don't you come up and share some more with us?